Hey Bat fans, welcome back to DC Comics Unmasked, where we're going to once again continue our epic history on the Dark Knight himself, Batman. And we're actually going to be going into the modern age of Batman, which spans from about 1985 to the present. So that's a lot of time. It's actually more time than, actually twice as much time as the Bronze Age or the Silver Age or the Golden Age. So we've decided to break up this section into count 'em, four Batman videos. So once again, just a little quick reminder, our videos are chock full of spoilers. So if you're not down for that and, learning all the secrets about what's going on in the comics, you're excused, okay? Other than that, just a quick note for later down the road. Obviously, even though we're talking about Batman right now, we're going to be talking about other characters that we will have videos for, such as Dick Grayson / Nightwing / Robin, whatever you want to call him. Just because you can't talk about Batman without talking about his allies or his villains. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Anyway, I think it's time to move on because we've got a lot to cover. So let's start our exploration of the modern age of Batman in 1985. In our last video, we saw not only the addition of a new Robin in the form of Jason Todd to the Bat family, but also the death of the Golden Age Batman of Earth 2, while the Silver / Bronze Age Earth 1 Batman continued his crusade for justice. To say this was confusing would be putting it lightly, and Batman and his allies weren't the only ones affected by the multiverse's lack of continuity. With the growing number of new superheroes, along with the different versions of Superman, The Flash, and Green Lantern, just to name a few, DC had written its universe into a jumbled mess, which needed to be untangled if they hoped to attract any new readers. However, they couldn't simply disregard what had already been created and start fresh without some explanation. So in April of 1985, DC started an epic miniseries known as Crisis on Infinite Earths, which would serve that purpose. In the series, an unknown villain had set into motion the destruction of the multiverse, one Earth at a time. With the help of various heroes from Earths 1, 2, and 3, a being known as the Monitor attempts to stop this, and while they were able to defeat the villain, the individual worlds cease to be, leaving a brand new world with an unlimited potential for new stories and characters. This blank slate was the perfect canvas for artist and writer Frank Miller to give his personal take on Batman. So in 1986, Miller debuted what would later be considered one of the most iconic stories in the Batman mythos, The Dark Knight Returns. Instead of starting at the beginning of Batman's career, this story shows a possible future where an older Batman is forced out of retirement to deal with a growing threat of a gang known as the Mutants. He would be joined in this fight by the energetic but somewhat neglected young girl, Carrie Kelly, who would don the Robin persona as the first woman to take the role. That's not to say that neither Dick Grayson nor Jason Todd existed in this world, as both are mentioned in the work, but are currently out of the picture. In fact, a comment about the character of Jason Todd in this work would prove to be highly prophetic in years to come. Other characters that would appear in this four-part series included Catwoman, the Joker, Commissioner Gordon, and Superman himself. The dark and gritty tone and themes of The Dark Knight Returns was a huge hit with the readers, prompting the people at DC to gift Miller with the opportunity to retell the origins of Batman within this new continuity. The result was the 1987 story, Batman Year One. The first part of the story, published in issue 404 of the Batman comic, followed Bruce's first year of fighting crime after he returned from traveling the world honing his skills. The story also gave a look into the career of Jim Gordon, who, having just arrived in Gotham, must wrestle with the rampant police corruption within his department. Now presented with this new, darker version of Batman, writer Max Allan Collins, artist Chris Warner, and editor Dennis O'Neil set to work on trying to fix the problem that was Jason Todd, who at this point was the literal red-headed stepchild of the Bat family. The Band-Aid attempt of patching up Jason's copycat origin story in the Batman Anniversary special a couple years earlier hadn't done much to warm the readers to the character. So with this new version of Batman came a new version of Jason Todd. Still presented as the second Robin after Dick Grayson, this Jason, a street-smart orphan, was given a much more original backstory, where he first encounters Batman when he is caught attempting to steal the tires off the Batmobile. Batman takes him to a crime alley-based orphanage, but is shocked to find that the woman running the institution, Mama Gunn, is using the orphanage as a front to create a pack of young criminals. Together with Jason's help, Batman takes down Mama Gunn and her operation. Bruce takes Jason on as his newest ward, and eventually as his new partner in fighting crime, as Jason becomes the second Robin. In the same year, writer Mike W. Barr and artist Jerry Bingham produced an oversized hardcover one-shot graphic novel entitled Son of the Demon. The story had Batman teaming up with his adversary, Ra's al Ghul, and his daughter Talia, in order to stop the terrorists Quayan and General Yosid, who have created a weapon that would allow them to control the weather. Over the course of their time working together, Batman has the opportunity to properly romance his off-again, on-again love interest Talia, and learns that Ra's has actually performed a wedding ceremony for the two of them, where only the consent of the bride is needed to make the two technically married. Kinda sketchy if you ask me. Talia soon becomes pregnant, but the looming prospect of a child greatly affects Batman, softening him, and making him question the risks that he takes as a vigilante. In trying to protect Talia from one of Quayan's agents, Bruce is almost killed, which makes Talia realize that she cannot allow him to continue this way. She tells him that she has suffered a miscarriage, and devastated by the news, Bruce and Talia have their marriage dissolved. Bruce returns to Gotham while Talia sees through the pregnancy in secret. She gives birth to a healthy baby boy, but leaves him with an orphanage where he is soon adopted by a Western couple. With this particular graphic novel being described as a standalone, the story within wasn't completely considered part of the new Batman continuity. However, years later, writer Grant Morrison would retcon the origins of this child, transforming him into the character of Damian Wayne, which we will get into a little further in this series. As the late 80s continued to roll on, the comics that had once shied away from the dark storylines now fully embraced them, delving into mature and even controversial themes, with Miller's The Dark Knight Returns leading the charge. With the Cold War between the United States and the USSR still trudging on, several writers at DC pulled from the conflict to craft new storylines and villains. In 1988, in the 417th issue of Batman, the Caped Crusader was pitted against the Soviet assassin KG Beast in a 4-part storyline called 10 Nights of the Beast. With this new villain being physically superior to Batman, Gotham's vigilante had to rely on his brains to trap and ultimately defeat the Soviet. This storyline is considered one of Batman's darkest ones, as it is unclear whether Batman ever goes back to free the criminal, or if he just allows his foe to starve to death while trapped underground. Another writer who had taken inspiration from the Cold War conflict was Alan Moore, who had penned the landmark graphic novel Watchmen 2 years before. But while he had been working on Watchmen, Moore had another Batman-focused project percolating on the back burner for the past 4 years. The result was a 48-page mature reader's story, Batman: The Killing Joke, that was published in July of 1988. Divided into 2 parts, the story followed Batman in his pursuit of a recently escaped Joker, while a flashback story gave a more detailed recounting of the Clown Prince of Crime's origin. While pulling heavily from the 1951 story, The Man in the Red Hood, This telling went further into the motivations of the man who would become the Joker. Though his real name is never given, the man who became the Joker was an unsuccessful stand-up comedian who, in a desperate bid for money, dons the red hood to aid in a robbery at the Ace Chemical Factory. As we already know, Batman interrupts his crime, and when the Red Hood jumps into a vat of chemicals to escape, his appearance is forever altered, compromising his already fragile psyche, and the Joker is born. Meanwhile, in the present-day part of the story, the Joker breaks into Commissioner Gordon's home and shoots Barbara, leaving her for dead. He kidnaps Jim, attempting to drive him insane as he forces him through a funhouse plastered with photos of a bleeding Barbara, who for some reason needs to be shown naked. Yet, as always, Batman is able to track the Joker down and save Commissioner Gordon. Barbara survives as well, but is now paralyzed from the waist down, thus ending her time as Batgirl. But this would not be the end of Barbara's crime-fighting career, as she would return the following year in Suicide Squad number 23 as the mysterious computer hacker and information broker known as Oracle. However, the events that take place in The Killing Joke would not be the biggest shakeup to happen that year. Despite the modern-age revamp that further separated him from Dick Grayson, the writers at Batman were still struggling with what they should do about Jason Todd. Jason, much like the term fetch, just wasn't catching on. So, in an unprecedented move, DC left the decision of Jason's fate with the readers. In a multi-part saga entitled A Death in the Family, which started with Batman number 426, the readers were given a 1-900 number where they could call in and pay 50 cents to vote as to whether Jason would live or be killed off during the story. It turned out that fans weren't more divided than they originally thought, as the decision to kill Jason only won out by a very small margin of votes. So while Jason is on a quest to discover his true birth mother, which takes him through 3 possibilities, he is captured and savagely beaten by the Joker. Finally, in an act that would haunt Batman forever, the Joker blew up the building he was keeping Robin in, leaving Batman to find his body among the rubble. He tracks down the Joker, but there is some really weird, convoluted story about the Joker becoming an Iranian ambassador to the UN under the Ayatollah that keeps Batman from taking his immediate revenge. Because, who wouldn't want to let the Joker into the UN and give him diplomatic immunity? I mean, seriously, guys, I cannot make this stuff up. But, of course, the Joker tries something and Batman is allowed to go after him. He gives the Joker a satisfying beatdown, but the Joker tries to escape via helicopter, and in the ensuing flight, the helicopter crashes. Batman is inexplicably saved by Superman, but when he looks to recover the Joker's body from the wreckage, it is nowhere to be found, leaving the reader to figure that the Clown Prince of Crime has once again escaped. To this day, Batman's inability to save his young partner is considered his greatest failure. However, as many of us know, this would not be the last we would see of Jason Todd. Moving on to the last year in the 1980s, filmgoers everywhere rushed to see the first of Tim Burton's Batman movies, which hit movie theaters on June 23rd of 1989. Simply titled Batman, with actor Michael Keaton playing Bruce Wayne/Batman, and Jack Nicholson as the villainous Joker, the movie both surprised and delighted the audience with its serious take on the characters. This included a somewhat altered history, where Jack Napier, the man who would eventually become the Joker during the events of the movie, was shown to also be the man who had gunned down Bruce's parents all those years ago. But just because Batman had finally hit the big screen didn't mean that his comic book exploits had fallen to the wayside. Continuing from the plotline established in Frank Miller's Year 1, Batman Year 2, Fear the Reaper, was written by Mike W. Barr with art by Paul Neary, Alfredo Alcala, Mark Farmer, and Todd McFarlane. During this 4-part series, Batman struggled with his relationship with the GCPD, as the return of Gotham's first vigilante, known as the Reaper, pushed Batman to try using firearms in his battle against him. This story would not only include a new love interest, Rachel Caspian, but would also have Batman come face to face with Joe Chill, the man who murdered his parents. But despite all this, the Fear the Reaper story didn't have many plot points that stuck, as by the end, his relationship with Rachel is broken off, the Reaper is gone, and while Bruce originally thought to hang up the cowl after dealing with Chill, he instead continues to wear the mantle of the Bat. Right on the heels of Year 2, the writers at DC did a modern-day adaptation of Dick Grayson's origin story in the series titled Batman Year 3. And while much was the same, a new detail added to the story. The presence of a young boy named Timothy Drake at the circus the night Dick's parents died would soon change the Batman landscape once again. Year 3 would also tell the tale of Dick's progression from the first Robin and later into Nightwing, while also taking a look at Batman's grief over the death of Jason Todd. Following a month or two after the run of Batman Year 3, writer Grant Morrison and painter-artist David McKean showcased a visionary standalone comic, Batman: Arkham Asylum. The story followed Batman as he entered Arkham as part of a negotiation between the police and the inmates who had taken over the asylum. While inside, we are given a more complex examination of some of Batman's villains, along with the history of the founder of the asylum, Amadeus Arkham. Amadeus's story is quite remarkable, if not a bit confusing, as we see the man try to understand the inmate Martin Mad Dog Hawkins. But when Hawkins kills Amadeus's wife and child, the asylum's founder loses control as well as chunks of his memory, resulting in him murdering his mother and becoming just another inmate. The comic delved deeply into the psyches of Batman's villains, but also raised the question as to whether or not Batman himself belonged in the asylum, a theme that would pop up sporadically throughout the coming years. While DC was still dealing with the fallout of Jason's death and their plans to get a new Robin back into the Batman comics, a new solo Batman title, Legends of the Dark Knight, premiered. Supposedly set during the first 3 years of Batman's crime-fighting career, the adventures within only dealt with the Dark Knight, which is a little confusing seeing as the recently released Year 3 shows Dick Grayson's arrival. Regardless of the discrepancy, the series was a hit, running for an impressive 214 issues. Now getting back to the main Batman comic book storyline, the writers at DC soon got their chance to reveal the significance of the addition of Timothy, Tim for short, Drake, in Batman number 442. Having now retold the origins of both Batman and Robin in the Years series, along with Dick Grayson's transitions from Robin into Nightwing, the Batman stories now showed Dick Grayson as a young adult and hero in his own right, while the death of Jason Todd left the position of Robin empty, but not for long. Now a tech-savvy teenager, Tim deduces both Batman's and Nightwing's identities and earns his place as the new Robin. Before we say goodbye to the 1980s, one more standalone Batman comic was produced. Written and drawn by Mike Vignola of Hellboy fame, the standalone comic Gotham by Gaslight explored an alternate past where in 1888 a Victorian version of Batman roams the streets of Gotham, investigating the murders committed by the infamous Jack the Ripper. While the story is completely non-canon, it's a fun read and should be checked out if you have the chance. So that's the end of Batman's adventures in the 1980s, and as well as the end of this video. So we hope you enjoyed watching, and be sure to come back for the second part in our series on the modern age of Batman. We got 3 more parts coming at you. Also be sure to like and subscribe if you are enjoying what you're seeing, and go ahead check out our other shows such as A Cup of Ice and Fire and Harvey and Jill's not so perfect reviews. Once again, thanks for watching, and we hope to see you again.